Carl Jung once revealed a discovery so dangerous that he believed it could either destroy a person or transform them into something extraordinary. It wasn't about mental illness, nor was it about delusion. It was about a rare kind of perception, an almost superhuman ability to notice everything that others overlook. Jung called this differentiated perception. These were people who could see through masks, detect lies instantly, and sense the hidden emotions floating in a room. They were not guessing, they were perceiving unconscious patterns most people never notice. But here's the catch. This ability didn't make their lives easier. In fact, Jung noticed that these individuals often ended up isolated, exhausted, and unable to maintain ordinary relationships. It wasn't because they were unstable. It was because carrying this level of awareness came at a price few could endure. They were mirrors that society couldn't stand to look into. And for Jung, that made them both fascinating and dangerously vulnerable. One of the cases that revealed this discovery to Jung came in 1913, during his own psychological crisis after his break with Freud. A patient, an introverted, intuitive type, walked into his life. She possessed what Jung later described as undifferentiated intuitive perception. She could step into any setting and immediately sense the unspoken atmosphere. Who was hurting? Who was lying? Who secretly despised someone else? She picked it all up effortlessly. At first, Jung thought this might be some form of pathology. But the more he tested her perceptions, the more he realized she wasn't delusional. She was accurate, frighteningly accurate. She spoke about others as though she had access to their private thoughts and hidden motives. And when Jung carefully verified her observations, they turned out to be true. What she experienced was not psychosis, but a consciousness so advanced that it had become socially dangerous. This ability, however, left her suffering. She couldn't make small talk because she saw through every facade. Friendships fell apart because people felt exposed around her. Jobs never lasted because her presence disrupted the invisible agreements groups rely on to stay functional. Jung realized that she wasn't broken. She was what happens when perception becomes too differentiated for social survival. But there was something even more disturbing. Jung noticed that her perception was not just heightened, it was overwhelming. He began investigating what he later called participation mystique, a phenomenon where highly intuitive individuals don't just notice conscious cues. They actually absorb the unconscious atmosphere of the people around them. Imagine walking into a room and feeling not only the words people speak, but their repressed fears, their unspoken rage, their hidden sadness, all flowing into you at once. Modern psychology would later confirm parts of this. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive persons shows that about 20% of people have heightened sensitivity. But Jung narrowed it down even further. A rare type, roughly 1% of the population, the introverted intuitive type. These people don't just feel deeply, they perceive unconscious patterns with shocking clarity. They see the despair behind the forced smile. They sense the panic behind the confident voice. They feel the collective shadow that entire groups unconsciously agree to ignore. Jung's warning was chilling. The danger lies not in the perception itself, but in the isolation it creates. When you see what others cannot or refuse to, your greatest gift becomes your greatest burden. Society often cannot bear the presence of someone who sees too much. Jung realized that the true danger of this perception wasn't the act of seeing, but what followed afterward. When someone perceives unconscious truths too clearly, they inevitably become a mirror. And most people cannot tolerate a mirror that reflects back their own hidden flaws, lies, and fears. Jung observed that highly perceptive individuals almost always became scapegoats, not because they created problems, but because they revealed them. This pattern repeated itself in his clinical work. Patients with this heightened intuition would make simple, even gentle observations, like noticing that someone seemed troubled. Instead of gratitude, they were often met with hostility. "Stop being so negative," people would snap, or "Why are you making drama?" They were blamed for creating the very issues they were only reflecting. Jung concluded that this wasn't coincidence. It was a psychological defense. People would rather attack the mirror than face their own shadow. He wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But that requires humility, something many resist. For most, it's easier to project the shadow onto someone else, turning the perceiver into the enemy." This is why Jung described these individuals as magnets for projection. They became lightning rods for everyone else's hidden darkness. This is what Jung called the problem of the superior function. Your greatest strength, the very faculty that sets you apart, becomes the source of your greatest suffering. When others sense that you see them too clearly, they can't relax around you. Friendships, marriages, workplaces, none of these can function normally because your presence destabilizes the unconscious agreements that allow people to coexist. To make sense of this, Jung began categorizing different ways this overwhelming perception showed up. He identified 4 distinct patterns among introverted intuitive types. Type 1, the feeling intuitive. These individuals don't just recognize emotions, they feel them in their own bodies. They absorb others' grief, joy, or anger so completely that they often lose track of their own feelings. Jung described them as living in perpetual emotional contagion. Imagine constantly carrying not only your own emotions, but everyone else's as well. Type 2, the thinking intuitive. This type doesn't drown in emotion. Instead, they notice patterns and outcomes before anyone else does. They can predict relationship failures, career collapses, or personal crises with eerie accuracy. They don't reach conclusions through logic, but through unconscious pattern recognition. Jung noted their ability to see the logical conclusions of unconscious processes that others cannot yet see. Type 3, the sensation intuitive. These individuals sense psychological states through physical signals. They pick up on subtle changes in posture, tone, or energy that reveal illness, fatigue, or distress before anyone else notices. Jung described them as early warning systems for psychological and physical imbalances. Type 4, the pure intuitive, the rarest and often the most overwhelmed. They see everything but lack the structure to make sense of it. They drown in a flood of impressions they can't always organize or communicate clearly. Jung said they live in a state of perpetual overwhelm, receiving vast amounts of unconscious information without adequate psychological structure to process it constructively. Each type carried different challenges, but all faced the same core problem: seeing too much without knowing how to integrate it. For Jung, this explained why many of his most gifted patients were also the most tormented. The danger wasn't madness, it was drowning in perception without a lifeboat. Jung emphasized that the real peril of this rare gift lay in its consequences. Seeing everything without integration destabilizes both the individual and the collective. He identified 3 primary dangers that haunted people with differentiated perception. Danger 1, disrupting the collective unconscious. Societies, families, and organizations are held together not only by rules, but by unspoken agreements, illusions everyone silently agrees to maintain. Jung wrote that the individual who perceives too clearly threatens the collective agreements upon which social cohesion depends. When a perceptive individual exposes those illusions, even unintentionally, they destabilize the group. For example, a workplace might function by pretending everyone supports a flawed leader. The perceptive person sees through the pretense, and just by existing authentically, they violate the unconscious pact. This can turn them into an outsider or even a threat. Danger 2, psychological isolation. Jung called this the problem of the superior function. The very talent that makes someone exceptional also isolates them. He warned, "The curse of consciousness is that it cannot be shared with those who do not possess it." Imagine feeling like you're living in a different reality from everyone else, seeing what they deny, sensing what they suppress. This isn't just social loneliness, it's existential isolation. You're awake in a world that prefers to remain asleep. Danger 3. Identity dissolution. Perhaps the most frightening outcome is when perception becomes so overwhelming that a person loses touch with their own identity. Jung described this as participation mystique, a state where the boundaries between self and others blur. The person absorbs so much unconscious material from their environment that they no longer know which thoughts, feelings, or impulses belong to them. It's not just exile. It's psychological annihilation, the loss of a stable sense of self. To counter these dangers, Jung developed a process he called individuation. It was his method for helping people maintain their authentic identity while engaging consciously with unconscious contents. He laid out 3 main phases. Phase 1. Recognition and differentiation. The first task is learning to discriminate between what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Jung called this conscious discrimination. Without it, there's no development, only confusion. He instructed patients to spend daily time in solitude, letting absorbed material settle so their true inner voice could emerge. Phase 2. Shadow integration. Many perceptive individuals see others' shadows so vividly because they haven't yet integrated their own. Jung warned that the more you deny your own flaws, the more disturbing you'll find them in others. Shadow work means acknowledging that you contain every human quality you notice outside of yourself. Selfishness, cruelty, dishonesty. This doesn't make you broken. It makes you whole. Phase 3. Conscious participation. Finally, Jung taught that the goal isn't to withdraw from the collective, but to participate consciously. The individuated person can engage with others' unconscious material without being swallowed by it. Jung encouraged patients to develop psychological containers, an inner strength that allows them to hold others' emotions temporarily while remembering this is not mine. This way, perception becomes a gift rather than a curse. Jung didn't stop at theory. He looked to history to understand what happens when superior perception is integrated or when it fails. To illustrate the stakes of this discovery, Jung examined historical figures who embodied the 2 possible outcomes, collapse or transformation. One cautionary tale came from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Jung admired Nietzsche's penetrating insight, but also saw his downfall as a warning. Nietzsche's superior perception allowed him to cut through illusions in society, religion, and philosophy with terrifying clarity. He could see through facades others didn't dare question. But Nietzsche never learned to integrate this overwhelming perception. Instead, he wielded it like a weapon, tearing down belief systems without offering a path toward wholeness. Jung observed that Nietzsche became consumed by the very visions he exposed. His insight isolated him, and over time, that isolation fed into psychological collapse. Jung reflected that Nietzsche didn't fail because he saw too much, but because he lacked the tools to carry what he saw. This, Jung believed, was the tragic outcome of unintegrated superior perception. The gift turns against the individual, burning them from within. In contrast, Jung studied Meister Eckhart, a medieval mystic who he believed represented the opposite path: successful integration. Eckhart also possessed what Jung called mystical intuition, the ability to perceive hidden realities of both the human psyche and the spiritual world. But unlike Nietzsche, Eckhart transformed his vision into compassionate wisdom. He didn't overwhelm people with what he saw. He expressed insights in ways that others could digest. His perception became a source of nourishment, not destruction. Jung attributed Eckhart's success to what he called conscious humility. Eckhart understood that his extraordinary perception wasn't an absolute truth to be forced on others, but a gift to be shared carefully. By framing his insights as invitations rather than confrontations, he managed to bridge the gap between his superior perception and the collective unconscious. Even Jung himself wasn't spared from this struggle. Between 1913 and 1919, during what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious, Jung nearly lost himself. He recorded this experience in his Red Book. He described how his own superior perception, his ability to sense unconscious contents both in himself and in others, threatened to drive him into psychosis. What saved him, he admitted, was his determination to understand and integrate what was happening, rather than letting it consume him. This breakthrough led Jung to view overwhelming perception not as pathology, but as evolution. He began to see his patients' extraordinary sensitivities as a glimpse of consciousness trying to grow beyond current human limitations. What seemed like madness was in fact the early form of an emerging awareness. But even with this new understanding, Jung knew that no one could carry such a burden alone. That's why he emphasized the importance of finding the few who understand. He argued that highly perceptive individuals need relationships with others who can engage with their insights without defensiveness. He outlined 3 essential types of supportive relationships. Fellow individuated persons. Those rare individuals who have gone through their own deep psychological transformation. They recognize each other instantly, often with a sense of profound authenticity. Those actively engaged in their own individuation people, doing therapy, spiritual practice, or deep self-work. They may not have superior perception themselves, but they understand its value. Natural containers. Individuals who, through maturity or life experience, can hold psychological material without being overwhelmed. For Jung, these allies were not optional. They were lifelines. Without them, the danger of drowning in perception remained ever present. Jung didn't just describe the need for supportive relationships, he also offered practical guidance on how highly perceptive individuals could identify safe people and protect themselves from harm. He called this the recognition process. There were clear indicators, Jung noted, that someone could handle your insights without fear or hostility. These people ask genuine questions instead of immediately defending themselves. They can admit their own contradictions without collapsing into shame. They show what Jung called psychological mindedness, an openness to exploring inner reality. Most importantly, they remain emotionally stable, even when confronted with uncomfortable truths. But even with safe people, Jung urged caution. He developed what he described as a gradual revelation protocol. The idea was simple. Don't unload your deepest perceptions all at once. Start with small, gentle observations. Watch how the other person responds. Do they grow defensive or do they show curiosity? If they prove capable of handling deeper truths, then and only then reveal more. Frame your insights as offerings, not pronouncements. This way, perception becomes a bridge rather than a weapon. Jung's ultimate goal was not only to protect these individuals, but also to help them transform their overwhelming perception into something that could serve both themselves and the collective. He believed that when integrated, superior perception plays a vital role in the evolution of human consciousness. He described this transformation as occurring in 4 stages. Stage 1, recognition, without overwhelm. The first step is simply acknowledging the gift. Jung wrote, "The beginning of wisdom is the recognition of what one actually is, not what one wishes to be or fears to be." Many patients initially treated their sensitivity as a curse, but learning to see it as an ability shifted everything. Stage 2, integration without isolation. The second stage involves using perception constructively while maintaining human connection. Jung called this social individuation. Instead of withdrawing from society in despair, the individuated person learns to stay engaged while remaining authentic. Stage 3, service without sacrifice. Here, the ability becomes a gift to others rather than a private burden. The perceptive individual learns how to help without depleting themselves. Jung emphasized that true individuation turns perception into conscious service, not martyrdom. Stage 4, legacy without attachment. The final stage, what Jung referred to as the transcendent function, is when the individual contributes to cultural evolution without clinging to recognition. They no longer need society to validate their insights. Instead, they live as consciousness pioneers, preparing humanity for truths not yet widely understood. Jung believed that individuals who reached this stage were crucial for collective development. He wrote, "What is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate." In other words, the insights of highly perceptive individuals can prevent destructive patterns in society if those insights are integrated and expressed wisely. But he also knew the path was perilous. For every Meister Eckhart who integrated perception successfully, there was a Nietzsche who burned under its weight. To avoid collapse, Jung carefully documented the pitfalls that could derail the transformation process. Jung warned that the journey of integrating superior perception was filled with traps, pitfalls that could undo years of progress if one wasn't careful. He identified 4 of the most common dangers that perceptive individuals faced. Pitfall 1. The inflation trap. This happens when someone becomes identified with their superior function. Instead of integrating their perception, they believe it makes them special chosen or destined to save others. Jung called this psychological inflation. He cautioned that when the ego fuses with the archetype, the result is isolation and arrogance. The individual begins to preach rather than connect, convinced they hold absolute truth. Jung described this as one of the fastest paths to collapse writing. The moment one believes oneself to be the bearer of absolute truth, one has fallen into the trap of unconscious possession. Pitfall 2. Withdrawal, disguised as wisdom. Another danger occurs when individuals retreat completely from society, convincing themselves that others are too unconscious to be worth engaging. To Jung, this wasn't enlightenment, it was avoidance. He argued that true individuation requires engagement with the unconscious world, not escape from it. The hermit who isolates out of disdain for others hasn't transcended life. They've been defeated by it. Pitfall 3. The helper's identity. Some perceptive individuals fall into the trap of defining themselves entirely through helping others. They become addicted to being needed, pouring all their energy into saving others, while neglecting their own inner growth. Jung warned that when perception becomes identity, the person disappears behind the role. Instead of individuation, this becomes a subtle form of self-erasure. Pitfall 4. The overwhelm return. Even those who succeed in integration can relapse during times of stress or trauma. Old boundaries collapse, and they once again drown in the flood of unconscious material around them. Jung emphasized that individuation is not a one-time achievement. It's a living process requiring ongoing attention and discipline. To help maintain integration, Jung developed a series of ongoing practices he called integration maintenance. These included regular solitude time set aside to let absorbed material settle, so the individual could separate their own voice from the voices of others. Conscious choice of engagement. Deciding when, where, and with whom to use their perceptive abilities, rather than being open to everything all the time. Continuous shadow work to prevent projecting one's own unconscious material onto others. Reality checking connections, relationships with people capable of offering grounding perspectives. Creative expression, using art, writing, or other outlets to process overwhelming perceptions. For Jung, these practices were not luxuries. They were survival tools. He reminded his patients that integration didn't mean perfection, but learning to dance consciously with their own psychological complexity. Through this lens, superior perception wasn't just a personal quirk. It was part of something larger, an evolutionary function for humanity itself. Jung began to see highly perceptive individuals as the advanced scouts of consciousness people, who encounter new psychological territories before the collective is ready. Jung argued that throughout history, individuals with superior perception often appeared before society was ready to hear them. He called them consciousness pioneers, people whose psychological development outpaced the collective. Their lives often followed a tragic pattern. They sensed truths too early, tried to express them, and were rejected or condemned. Yet over time, those same truths became cultural wisdom. He wrote, "What appears in the individual first as psychological insight later manifests in the collective as cultural transformation." In other words, the individual serves as a laboratory where consciousness experiments with ideas that will eventually reshape humanity. In modern times, Jung believed these perceptive individuals might already be sensing things that others can't yet see clearly. They might feel the psychological roots of environmental collapse, the unconscious drivers of social unrest, or the hidden costs of technological progress long before they become undeniable. They might intuit spiritual possibilities beyond rigid religious systems or detect collective shadows society refuses to face. For Jung, this explained why many perceptive people suffer so deeply. Their symptoms are not just personal. They are reflections of collective issues struggling to reach consciousness. He wrote that the sensitive individual feels the collective problems first and most intensely. Their private pain is often the world's pain felt ahead of time. But Jung was clear the purpose of this gift was not martyrdom. The goal is not to be a victim of consciousness, he emphasized, but to serve as a bridge between what is and what is becoming. The individuated person doesn't carry perception as a curse. They learn to use it wisely, transforming it into what Jung called cultural medicine. At the highest level of integration, perception becomes light rather than weight. Jung described this as the transcendent function, a state where the individual sees clearly without becoming attached to fixing or controlling what they see. They can hold awareness without being consumed by it, embodying a more conscious way of living simply through their presence. To demonstrate this, Jung often pointed back to the patient from 1913, the intuitive woman who struggled under the weight of her perception. After 3 years of working with Jung, her life transformed. She learned to separate her own psychological material from what she absorbed from others. She found work as a counselor using her gift to help rather than to isolate. She formed relationships with people who valued her insights rather than rejecting them. Most importantly, she stopped experiencing her perception as a curse and began to see it as a gift that required conscious development. Jung summarized her transformation with one powerful line. The patient learned not to see less, but to see more wisely, not to perceive less deeply, but to engage more consciously with what she perceived. Her gift remained intact, but her relationship to it changed from torment to integration. Jung's insights into superior perception weren't meant to remain abstract theory. He believed individuals with this rare gift needed concrete practices to survive and thrive. Without intentional strategies, the gift easily turned into a burden. With conscious effort, however, it could become a source of strength and contribution. The first strategy Jung recommended was structured solitude. Perceptive individuals absorb enormous amounts of unconscious material from others. Emotions, thoughts, and unspoken tensions. Without solitude, they drown in this input. Jung encouraged daily time alone, not as withdrawal, but as cleansing. Solitude allowed them to let others' psychic contents settle so they could hear their own authentic voice. Second, Jung stressed the importance of clear boundaries. This meant deciding consciously when and how to use their perceptive abilities. Not every situation required deep intuition. Sometimes it was healthier to remain on the surface. For example, in casual social settings, constantly scanning for hidden motives only invited exhaustion. Boundaries helped prevent burnout. Third, he recommended creative expression as a vital outlet. Writing, painting, dancing, or music provided channels to process overwhelming impressions. Jung himself painted mandalas and kept detailed journals during his confrontation with the unconscious. He saw creativity not as hobby, but as medicine for the psyche. Fourth, Jung pointed to the need for ongoing shadow work. Perceptive individuals often spot shadows in others, but resist acknowledging their own. By confronting their hidden selfishness, envy, or cruelty, They reduce the risk of projecting onto others or being destabilized by what they perceive. Shadow work balanced perception with humility. Fifth, Jung emphasized choosing the right environment. Some spaces are toxic for perceptive individuals. Workplaces driven by denial, families built on secrets, or groups that punish truth-telling. He advised his patients to seek contexts where authenticity is valued, even if such places are rare. Better to have a small circle of genuine relationships than a wide network built on illusions. He also encouraged cultivating supportive relationships intentionally. Safe allies, the few who understand, could provide reality checks and grounding. For instance, when a perceptive person doubted whether they were seeing reality or simply projecting, a trusted companion could confirm or challenge their perspective. This prevented isolation from spiraling into paranoia. Finally, Jung saw service to others as the highest expression of integration. When perception was used not for superiority or control, but for compassion, it transformed from curse to gift. Counseling, teaching, mentoring, or even quietly supporting friends could give the perceptive individual a sense of purpose. The key was offering insights as gentle invitations, not harsh proclamations. Jung knew these practices didn't guarantee an easy life. The perceptive individual would always walk a more difficult path than most. But with conscious discipline, their sensitivity could shift from being a source of torment to becoming what he called cultural medicine. They were not meant to carry the world's unconsciousness alone, but to help illuminate it in ways that made collective growth possible. At the heart of Jung's most dangerous discovery lies a paradox. The variability that isolates and overwhelms a person can also become their greatest contribution to humanity. Seeing what others cannot see is not a curse. It is an invitation. An invitation to grow beyond comfort, to integrate what feels unbearable, and to offer those insights as guidance for others still trapped in unconsciousness. The choice, Jung argued, is not whether you possess this perception, you already do. The real question is whether you will integrate it consciously. If you don't, it can lead to isolation, scapegoating, and even psychological collapse. But if you do it, can transform you into what Jung called a consciousness pioneer, someone who carries forward the evolution of human awareness. Remember, the world has always needed people who see further than the rest. They are the ones who challenge illusions, expose shadows, and prepare humanity for change. But to survive, they must learn to see wisely, not just deeply. They must learn to hold their insights with humility, discipline, and compassion. So if you recognize yourself in Jung's description, if you've always sensed more than others seem to, if you felt the weight of noticing what others deny, know this: you are not broken. You are not too much. You are exactly what this moment in human evolution requires. Your task is not to hide your gift, nor to wield it like a weapon. Your task is to integrate it until it becomes wisdom. Wisdom that can be shared without fear, without arrogance, and without collapse. As Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And if this resonates with you, don't walk this journey alone. Join the conversation, share your experiences in the comments, and connect with others walking the same path. If you found this exploration valuable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear these words. Together, we can learn to turn dangerous perception into cultural medicine and to see not as a curse, but as a gift that humanity desperately needs.